Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 274 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where we are coming to you live from PPP Moot 2022. And I'm genuinely pleased to be joined for this episode by none other than the Lord of the Mark and my friend, Shawn Marchese.
How kind of you to say that. That's very nice.
Are you shocked?
No, I'm not. It's just nice to hear. You never introduced me as your friend before on the show.
You've never left
I should
before.
quit more often. So, folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I'm Shawn Marchese, the prodigal Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, who really just can't seem to get rid of me, Alan Sisto.
Prodigal, huh? You know, you're not recklessly spendthrift that I'm aware of. I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Just save it for the Princess Bride thing tonight.
All right. Well, as I said today, folks, we are coming to you from PPP Moot 2022 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Happily, it is just as cold as I expected it to be. And something very strange is happening, Shawn. I've noticed the leaves are changing colors. I'm not used to that. Any idea what's going on here?
I've never seen it before in Texas. I have no idea. Maybe the trees are dying.
They have leaves in Texas?
We do have leaves in Texas.
All right, I wasn't
never
sure.
seen them die like this before.
No.
So I guess the question is, does anyone have any mithril?
We're done here, folks. I can't top that. Today we are going to be joined on stage by a few special guests, and we are going to be talking about our Moot theme as our strength lessons, perseverance, boldness, and courage in the face of impossible odds and waning strength.
Yeah, Alan and I were really inspired by our episodes at the end of Book 4, which is where we saw Sam's will harden, and that gave them the courage to go on out of Shelob's lair and through into Mordor, even though he thought Frodo was dead. And we decided to focus this moot on those moments of inspiring determination, hope against insurmountable odds, perseverance, and the heroic ethos as it appears time and time again through the stories of the Middle-earth legendarium.
And I'm hoping for at least one more chance to shout, Aure in Tuluva, preferably while swinging an axe.
Just wait until I'm off the stage to start swinging the axe, please.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am very, very sure. Although your moves at karaoke last night were pretty sweet. So
It was fun.
You had some moves, but
Mostly because I couldn't sing.
I'm not getting within axe swinging distance of you, though. Well, so some of you out there are hearing this, not some of you out there, but some of you out there in the future are hearing this show for the very first time. So for those, we bid you a warm welcome.
And a quick apology.
And multiple quick apologies. Here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we are reading, talking, and often joking our way through Middle-earth a few pages at a time.
We take a deep dive into the lore, we explore how the story came to be, we talk about our favorite themes, and a lot more.
But in a lighthearted and fun way, like a couple of friends chatting at a pub, because that's ultimately what we are. And we're glad you've joined us.
Indeed we are, and I'm sure you're going to be glad you joined as well. So let's go ahead and get this discussion started, and we'll begin by introducing our guests. But before we do, a real quick shout out to our editor, Jordan Rennells, who is recording this live.
So now we're going to go ahead and take turns introducing our guests, who are all secreted away in the audience right now.
It could be anyone.
And we're going to bring them up Price is Right style, right?
I think so.
All right. So the first guest who will be joining us is a Tolkien scholar and one of the hosts of the Tolkien Experience Podcast and creator of the Tolkien Experience Project, Dr. Luke Shelton.
Come on down. Our next guest has mistakenly agreed to join me for a chapter this season on the Prancing Pony Podcast, but fortunately, most of his other decisions have been good ones. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Matt from Nerd of the Rings.
And our third guest joining us needs no introduction, which means there's nothing for us to screw up. He is the Tolkien Professor himself, Mike Trout. No, I'm kidding. Corey Olsen.
Oh, that was brilliant. Well played, sir.
Thus ending any hope that another conference would go by without Mike giving me a hard time.
We'll just give you a hard time on his behalf.
All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to have just kind of a roundtable discussion about our theme today, and we are just going to...
Or an oblong table discussion, as the case may be.
Oblong table discussion, I think that works. Yeah, the round tables are all in the next room. Our theme today is As Our Strength Lessons, Perseverance, Boldness, and Courage in the Face of Impossible Odds and Waning Strength. And we're just going to throw some questions out. This is not super formal. I don't want you to wait until you're called on. We'll throw some questions out, maybe ask one of you to answer, but, feel free to just jump in. Let's have a conversation.
You've listened
about
to the show.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with Luke, who's sitting right to my left here. Luke, what's your favorite moment in the legendarium that illustrates the theme of perseverance against impossible odds?
Well, my favorite part is one that really I had overlooked until a couple of years ago. We've all been through a lot the last several years. Personally, I was sitting down with my wife recently, and we were, kind of adding up what the last couple of years has meant to us in terms of the people around us, and we realized we've missed 7 funerals in the last 3 years.
Wow.
Of close family members. And I happened to be reading through The Lord of the Rings with a student over the past couple of years. We decided we couldn't finish The Lord of the Rings without reading some of the appendices. You have to finish the stories of the different characters. And we got to the part where Arwen is grieving the loss of Aragorn. And what she yells over his tombstone is not Aragorn, it's Estelle. It's hope, over and over and over again. And so just in that moment of pure grief that she's shouting for hope, it just hit me like it'd never done before. And it just really sticks with me now.
That's amazing. And I'm glad you started with that one, because we've had a lot of talks over the last couple of days about, sort of the northern courage, right? The valor and the fighting prowess, that kind of perseverance. But there are other kinds of perseverance.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was thinking about this recently, it reminded me, Tolkien doesn't just have one word for hope, he has 2. I'll mention something that I don't bring up that often in my public talks is I was raised Christian. And in that experience, there's another set of words that we tend to distinguish between the meanings of in Christianity: happiness and joy. We're taught that joy is an abiding thing. It happens regardless of circumstances. But happiness, because it has that root of hap, meaning luck, it's very situationally dependent. So you can be joyful while still being sad, but you can't really be happy while still being sad. And I think that might be something that Tolkien is not necessarily consciously, but kind of channeling in those 2 different words of Estelle and Amdir. One is something that's going to be there. That Estelle is always going to be there, even in the face of tragedy or obstacles that are just overwhelming. But that Amdir can, come and go some.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's like an analogy almost between Estelle and Amdir and joy and happiness.
I think it's an interesting lens to look through. I don't know if Tolkien meant anything by it at all, but it really struck me recently that seems to line up for me.
Thoughts from down the table on any of this?
So Alan mentioned Aure in Tuluva. So the part that always comes to my mind, like when I read the description for the Moot, was after Hurin is captured. And in the face of Morgoth, he is defiant and pushes right back. And I mean, this is a mortal man. He's not a Valar. He's not even a Maiar. He's not even an elf.
No.
He is just a mortal man staring against, Tolkien's equivalent of Satan, and just giving it right back to him in the face. And it's always been a powerful moment since the first time I read Children of Hurin, and it's just really stuck with me.
Talk about perseverance against impossible odds.
Yeah, you're not like impossible odds. That's the very definition
of
it. Right.
Taken prisoner by Morgoth is pretty much impossible odds.
Yeah, you're not getting out of there.
Yeah. Corey, what about you? Answer to the same question?
This quote always makes me think of Sam, especially, of course, his trip across Mordor with Frodo. I think it's one of the places where we see it most explicitly evoked in the text. But, I also want to think about Sam afterwards. Like, it's not just the trip to Mount Doom where we see this. Right after that, from Sam's experience, there's been a while, but, they were unconscious. He wakes up in the field of Cormallen, and he has this moment where, for a time, at least briefly, it sounds like, Sam's statement of, is everything sad going to come untrue, right? And no, that's not going to, it looks for a moment to him like that's what's happening. But then after this, outpouring of joy and relief, Frodo's still alive and they won the war and all these things, he gets back to the Shire and we see him bursting out into tears again, right? And when he's confronted by what has happened in the Shire. And that the sort of the crushing consequence of that for him, that like now he, after everything, after having persevered through everything, he returns home and home is trashed, right? As he kind of knew it would be, like as he feared that it would be from what he saw in the Mirror of Galadriel, and now it's all turned out to be true. And his response to that is to go around the Shire planting trees, and that moment of even the sense in which he has no reasonable reason to think that that's going to mean anything for him, right? Like maybe his children's children will see the Shire as it should have been, right? And yet, that's what he does. That's what he devotes himself to doing. So, again, this obviously Sam gets and deserves much credit for his perseverance and his continuation past his strength in Mordor, carrying Frodo on his back. But I think sort of really the beginning of his leadership in the Shire, which we know will go on for many decades thereafter, that's really, I think we can see, it has the same shape, even though it's less dramatic, less dark in a lot of ways. But I think that element of Sam's story is also really, really inspiring in a similar way.
That's great. I actually thought of Sam myself when we were talking about the theme of this moot. And one of the phrases that I wrote down just on one of my notepads as I was thinking about things to talk about during this talk, Sam having it's a stubborn kind of hope that Sam has. Sam refuses almost consistently throughout the book. Sam refuses to let his spirits get brought down. He remains hopeful even when there's no good reason to.
It almost borders on the naive, you would say. I mean, he's so hopeful in the face of absurdly impossible odds that you just have to chalk it up sometimes to his lack of understanding and his innocence. And yet there's something deeper there.
There is, and I think even as he learns, because he does learn during the course of the journey, he continues holding on to that hope, even maybe after he's not quite as naive. And I don't know. I like the idea of stubbornness being a part of this.
I think
and the reason I like the idea of stubbornness being part of this is because it takes me back to Matt's example. Hurin, like in the face of Morgoth and the children of, that he is just stubbornly refusing to give in. And I wonder if there is a kind of stubbornness to this perseverance. Is that a common theme in these sort of moments of perseverance, or naivete? Is that a common thread in some of these moments of perseverance? I'm curious if the group has any thoughts on that.
I don't know if I would characterize it just as perseverance. I think that's definitely a part of it. But going back to Corey's example, I think one thing that Tolkien kind of uses to signal us that, what Sam has done is correct, is not only is Sam responsible for reinvigorating the Shire, but he's doing it the same way he always has, as a gardener first.
Right.
And so it's kind of, reinstilling this is who he is and who he always has been. So I think it is kind of reinforcing that viewpoint that you're talking about.
Well, no doubt.
And then I'm thinking about the example you gave, Luke, which was, I don't know if stubborn is the word that comes to mind with that example. It's just sort of a persistent hope.
So I want to start at the other end of the table on this one. Corey, this particular theme, of perseverance in the face of impossible odds and lessening strength, why is this such an important theme to Tolkien?
I think, first of all, as Mike was talking about this morning in his talk about the Battle of Malden, this is a concept, it's a spirit, this very dear to Tolkien from his studies. This is something that's very much a part of his world, the Northern Courage, his interest in and investment in this perspective, right, through the literature that he read, and the way in which we can see, again, as Mike was also talking about with his examples of Boromir and such, how we can see him sort of thinking through that and really kind of, giving a kind of life to it. It's one of the things I find so interesting about Tolkien as a scholar is his stubborn refusal to him, mere scholarly explanation was insufficient, right? We can see it in the Bjortnoth thing, right? I'm not just going to submit an essay to this journal, right? I'm going to give them a play too, which conveys what I'm trying to argue in, like in ways that a mere argument, could never do. And I think that we can see that his desire to kind of wrestle with these ideas and to think about, in some ways, increasing stubbornness in the post-war years. Like it became, even before the war, thinking back to, the medieval traditions was not exactly fashionable, right? But to still be interested in ideas of honor and courage in combat became much more unfashionable to think and to write about, and very much more against the grain in a lot of ways of his culture. And yet this was something that always had meaning for him, and I think clearly had more meaning, rather than feeling like, okay, all of those old ideas have been proven irrelevant, right, to the modern situation, which many people responded to the war, with that idea. Tolkien responded in the opposite way. No, these are more relevant, and I think that the way in which these things were really tied in, again, not just areas of scholarly interest on his part, but we see him thinking it through, working it through from his own life, from his own experience, processing his own experience through this. Clearly a lot that was very personal to him in that. But then he had to do that through writing, through art, right? And that act itself was like an act of stubborn perseverance as well. Yet another layer on which this, I think sort of felt important to him, felt relevant to him.
Yeah. Well, and thinking back to your talk yesterday, Corey, going back to the initial purpose of the TCBS, and the letter's not in front of me right now, but that great mission that they set for themselves at the beginning of their lives. Can't help but think, obviously we can't get inside Tolkien's head, but I can't help but think that that stubbornness was a drive to accomplish this thing. We need to get this done. We set out to do this, and we need to do it.
Mm-hmm. And then especially, of course, the pressure of the death of two
half
of them,
of the
right?
team.
I mean,
right?
that even within that letter, he feels the increased burden that what was 4 is now 3, and therefore the requirement on the 3 of us, 2 of us that are going to survive.
Right.
It becomes more. And again, as I said yesterday, the extent to which he was carrying that letter in exactly those terms, that concept throughout his entire life, I think that can be exaggerated, but still, clearly that sort of root of things, I think doesn't probably completely go away.
Yeah. And this was kind of a common reaction from the other Inklings as well, wasn't it? I don't know if any of us up here is really a C.S. Lewis scholar or expert, but C.S. Lewis had a similar kind of reaction.
To the war, you mean?
To the war, and sort of, kind of reacting similarly to Tolkien, and sort of processing the war through his writing.
Well, they were certainly like-minded in their responses to this literature, and the way, what this kind, not just Northern literature, which of course they shared in common, but fantasy literature, and the place and significance and function of fantasy literature and fairy stories and things like that. That was clearly something that they both agreed on and kind of processed these things in some similar ways. They were really different in lots of ways. It's always so dangerous to start making, it's so easy to lump Lewis and Tolkien together, and they are so different from each other in how they thought and a lot of things. But certainly their shared passion for Northern literature and the shared significance of fantasy, that's, I think, one of the things that they really did have in common.
Well, and just to keep going back to that same topic, I think one of the things that we often overlook is Tolkien certainly felt those personal connections of loss very deeply, but he was also on the Battle of the Somme, which, as an intrepid 8th grader, I wrote a biography of Tolkien because I had to write a biography of someone. And I was like, what is the rate of death on the Battle of the Somme? And so I took the total death toll and divided it out by hours and minutes, and someone died every 3 seconds for over 24 hours on the Battle of the Somme.
Yeah.
And he was in the middle of that. So not only does he have these personal connections that were lost, but he was at the battle where so many people died. He had to experience so much of that.
Yeah.
And so I do think he probably felt this kind of loss on a larger cultural sense as well of look at the lost generation. We have that saying. He probably was more aware of that than most of us could be.
Yeah.
So I think that probably also plays into that theme.
I think it does. And it also segues real nicely into the next question I was going to ask. So Matt, kind of following up on that, why does this theme resonate so strongly today with readers, even though we haven't had to live through, let's say, a world war or a Viking invasion? I mean, okay, granted, a global pandemic is no small thing, but it's not the trauma that a world war or a Viking invasion would be. Talk to us about your experience with how that theme resonates with readers.
Yeah, well, I think, the magic of Tolkien's writings is how applicable it is to adversity, great and small. We haven't dealt with Viking invasion. I haven't, and you obviously haven't. I don't know. If you have, I apologize for minimizing your struggle. But even not these great cataclysmic events and tragedies, even just things on a personal level, personal loss and personal hardship, just because we're not facing down the might of Sauron, literally, we can still take so much from these characters and how they respond to those events in their lives.
Yeah.
I guess we've always felt like there's a lot of lessons we can take from Tolkien's writing. And
absolutely.
And it can be, obviously he's writing about these epic world-changing things, and yet there's so much maybe applicability.
That's the word.
I'll go with that word.
absolutely,
Yeah, why
that's
not?
the word.
There is a lot of applicability to our own lives, even if we're not facing struggles of that magnitude.
Which we rarely will, let's be honest.
Hopefully,
Right.
yeah. But again, I don't know. There's something comforting in seeing heroic characters go through a huge struggle.
Yeah.
And feeling like, I can get through whatever I'm getting through. So
It's really interesting to me. A lot of people complain, basically. This is, of course, one of the classic and most ignorant things that people say about Tolkien when they dislike him, right? It's like, everything is so simple, everything is so black and white, right? Which is ridiculous. I love like in C.S. Lewis's review of The Two Towers. Well, now that we've got The Two Towers, I'm glad that we can finally put to rest that ridiculous criticism of The Lord of the Rings that some people made, that it's all black and white, and nobody will ever say that anymore, But of course, sadly, people didn't stop reading the books poorly or very little. Anyway, the idea is sometimes we can get kind of caught up in the idea, that the book is unrealistic, right? In the sense that, like, we're not going to experience things like this. It's not true. It doesn't map onto our experience in a kind of a direct way. And yet, I think one of the things that's so powerful about The Lord of the Rings is that Tolkien has built a world that is compellingly like the real world. Like, it's how life is. The consistency of loss, like, everyone is dealing with loss. It is very far from this, like, romantic, everything is wonderful, and then everybody lived. I mean, Sam is wrong. Like, everything sad is not going to come untrue. Like, that's exactly not what's going to happen at the end of The Lord of the Rings, as he, of course, will discover very poignantly when he gets home and when Frodo takes ship, right? This sense of the world is in decline, the great things are fading, and everyone is dealing with loss. Yes, that we're not going to be fighting against the Dark Lord. There might not be a eucatastrophe in our lives, and yet, like, that is true to our experience. And so there are ways in which I think the Lord of the Rings is more, in that sense, more realistic, more compellingly relevant to our experience than a lot of other works, which have the frame of a sort of a more realistic frame and talk about being sort of more true to life.
Other works can have the illusion of realism, but in actuality be about a a lifestyle or an experience that very few people can actually connect to.
Yes.
Aristocratic Brits at the beginning of the 20th century or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not picking on any particular work, but I'm thinking of like things that we would think of as more realistic can still be very alienating and like nothing like our real experience.
Yes.
Well, and you compare the way that Shippey compared Tolkien to other post-war writers, where you had Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen, who are writing from this kind of jaded perspective. My theory's always been Tolkien wasn't jaded by the war. He was already kind of he had already experienced enough loss that when the war came, he's like, see, this is kind of what we were all operating with the whole time. And so he didn't embrace that kind of cynicism. Instead, he works it into a way that, the world is filled with loss, and that's what we're always dealing with. And so I think that made it more resonant with a lot of people, because we don't go reaching for the Siegfried Sassoon when, our modern wars happen. We don't need more pessimism about the world. We need someone to tell us that this has always been here and we've always been fighting this war.
Wow, that's
excellent point. I can't think of the last time I needed cheering up and grabbed for Siegfried Sassoon.
Wilfred Owen.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Folks, before we get back to this panel discussion, we do want to make sure you know that even after you've listened to the episode, there is, as usual, a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
That's right. The PPP has an amazing listener community. They're always coming up with great questions and discussions across all of our social media spaces. So check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
On Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast. Follow the page to get the news, but be sure to join the group to get involved in some great discussions.
Or if you prefer Reddit, you can find us there at r/PrancingPonyPod. On Twitter and Instagram, we're simply at PrancingPonyPod.
And please, be sure to check out the Rings of Power Wrap-Up. Now, that's my new podcast with Sarah Brown and James Tauber, where we discuss, analyze, and speculate all about Amazon's television adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth.
Alan, James, and Sarah take deep dives into the lore behind the show, or the lore that should be behind the show. Talk about themes and characters and a whole lot more. So look for the Rings of Power Wrap-Up and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And check at Rings Wrap-Up on social media for more.
And folks, if you enjoyed the show, please consider supporting us by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. When you do, you get a lot. You get an active Discord community that includes live episode recordings, episode postscripts, episodes without digital ads, and a lot more.
Like free merch and live Discord hangouts. But you can also become part of our Questions After Nightfall episodes, or even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
And of course, you can also help us out by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, as well as a rating on Spotify. And please, don't forget to recommend us to your friends.
So getting back into the discussion here, I actually want to throw this next question back to Luke again, because you talked about Estelle and Amdir a moment ago. One of the things that I was thinking about as we were, again, preparing for the Moot, we talk about impossible odds. We've thrown this around a lot in the Moot literature, right? Perseverance against impossible odds, I mean, I guess the question, and I'll put it to the whole panel, but I want to start with Luke because he kind of hit on this earlier. I mean, are any odds impossible? I mean,
when is it? Is it 100 to 1? Is it 1,000 to 1? Is it 1,000,000 to 1? When does it become impossible?
I mean, what is the lesson of Tolkien, if not Estelle? And any thoughts on whether, are we oversimplifying by saying something is an impossible situation?
I think in a way we are oversimplifying when we say that something's impossible, because it's a value judgment. It's based on whoever's perspective we're looking through at the time. In a lot of ways, I think it depends on kind of the interiority of the person making that judgment. If it's someone who, whether through Northern courage or through Christian tradition, thinks that regardless of if I fail here, I can make an end in a different way, whether that's in the next life or being preserved through song, they're going to see things as different as someone who doesn't have either of those traditions, who might be coming up against something that seems like it's going to inevitably result in death. So I think kind of through both of those outlets, we have ways to see things as what once seemed impossible is now an obstacle that you can go through in one way or another.
I would also say, though, I do think it's important. It's not just, like, the perseverance it isn't only about persevering against really, really bad odds, right? Like a severe underdog in a sporting contest or in a battle, right? And I think the thing which is, to me, like qualitatively different is perseverance against actual impossible odds, like Hurin and Morgoth, right? It's not that he's facing a challenge which would be almost impossible to overcome. No, he's lost already. Like, it's over. He's been taken captive, and he is now being held by Morgoth. Even Maedhros wasn't in as bad a place as Hurin is, right? I'd rather be
Except I can
stapled
hear
to the
Maedhros
cliff.
now.
Yeah.
You had a chair?
I would rather be stapled to the cliff, though, than have Morgoth's attention constantly on me. No, but that's the point is, it's like what do you do? What is your attitude when you have lost? When the end is known beyond all doubt, right? Gandalf says despair is only for those who know the end beyond all doubt, and we don't. But what happens when you do? What when the end is certain? When you know you're going to lose. Like, it's not just about the kind of perseverance that can bring about victory when it's completely unexpected. Like, if you just persevere, maybe there will be a miraculous comeback and you'll actually win. And we see that kind of thing happening, right? And then there, of course, there's this similar but separate issue of the eucatastrophe that happens that you can't anticipate, right? But then there's this other thing. When the eucatastrophe does not come, and when you can't win, or when you've already lost, and that attitude, like, what then? What do you do then? And this is one of the things that, again, that I see in Tolkien that I don't see. I mean, I see in almost nowhere else. Like, very few writers in the 20th and 21st century have, that I've read anyway, have really addressed this. The ride now to ruin in the world's ending is not a response that I see in most works, and that, I think, is one of the really crucial things that Tolkien is sort of showing. Like that's a situation that he's not kind of turning away from.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction that you're making, because the odds are impossible. They go into a fey mood, as Tolkien likes to say. They know their death is imminent. How do they respond to that? And I think that plays well into one of the presentations earlier today. I think it was Thompson was the name, where, like you were mentioning, the type of eucatastrophe that we have is one that doesn't undermine the northern courage. They go through with the act knowing they're going to fail, but then the eucatastrophe comes later or not. But it doesn't ever undermine that courage to face the unknown or the impossible.
It's like, what's the line in the Beowulf essay, alluding to the idea that the warrior is going to go out and fight the monsters anyway, even though he knows he's not going to win. Isn't that in the Beowulf? Monsters. Thank you, Dr. Drought. Within time, the monsters would win. That was the line. I was looking out to him in the audience as well as looking down, because I know if somebody up here doesn't know it, he's going to know it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. So it's the idea of sort of facing your certain defeat, even though it is certain defeat, and going out and doing what you have to do anyway. Yeah, we're going to die, but we're going to go fight this thing anyway, that's Theoden in a
When the
nutshell,
seemingly
right?
impossible becomes inevitable, and it's no longer up in the air. How do you face that certainty? With what boldness, with what courage, with what strength do you... I think we just come back to that wonderful example of Hurin versus Morgoth, because, like you said, he's already lost. He is now captive. There is nothing he can do. He cannot overcome Morgoth. So there is certainty there. The only question is, how long is he going to suffer torment? Is he going to be able to give the easy way out and just die, or is he going to have to suffer? And in that case... Obviously, the courage is what enables him to suffer well, if you want to put it that way, to suffer with courage and strength and incredible stubbornness. I love that word. I love that we've chosen to kind of talk on that for a little bit. But yeah.
To change the odds a little bit, it's really easy to go to, like, these are the pinnacle of the stakes. But remembering myself as a as a much less learned student listening to some podcast, I don't know, like a decade ago, talk about the Fellowship's voyage to Rivendell and I'm looking over at the Tolkien Professor because it was his podcast, and Frodo turning back at the fort of Bruinen and making his one last defiant stand. Your reading of that really elevated that to me a lot more than I had anticipated at that moment, of Frodo pushing back against the ring wraiths.
Yeah.
That is a last defiant stand from Frodo.
Really
he cannot hold back against them. No. And he has no clue that the fort of Bruinen is going to rise up. And as readers, it's so easy to forget that and just know, he knows the water's going to come, because he doesn't. He has no idea. So that's just kind of a more kind of menial example of the same impulse that we're talking about, where, whether it's the ancient heroic guys or it's the smallest hobbit, that same impulse seems to be honored in Tolkien's world, regardless of the level it operates on.
Yeah. Well, and that impulse seems to be rewarded too, doesn't it? I mean, obviously, Frodo's defiance in resisting the shard of the Morgul blade for as long as he can, and that last defiant stand at the fort. I mean, if he had given up a long time ago, the story plays out very differently. If Hurin gives in and takes the easy death that Morgoth would probably gladly offer him, that story plays out quite differently indeed. I mean, does Morgoth stop?
Nienor might have been happier about that ending.
I mean, everyone would have been happier about that. I mean, does Morgoth kind of take his finger off the scales finally and let those poor people get some rest? I don't know.
Wow, you're right. The story definitely plays out differently one way or the other.
But then what does Glaurung do? I mean, seriously, do we end up? How much more damage is Glaurung? I mean,
exactly. It all ties together, doesn't it?
It does all tie together. Yeah.
Glaurung continues as a weapon of Morgoth in the First Age.
Yeah, I don't think Brandir is stopping him.
We're getting some great what-if scenarios here.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Yeah, we are. That's really interesting. We've given Turin a lot of grief on the podcast.
We have.
And I've gotten more sympathetic towards Turin over the past few years. I was kind of, for a long time, thank you. For a long time, I was like, this guy, he just cannot make a decent decision to save his life, and I was annoyed at that. And now I read it, and I'm like, this poor guy, he cannot make a decent decision to save his life.
There's a little bit of both, of course.
It's like I feel sorry for him.
Oh, I do. No, I hope that came through even when we were giving him a hard time. I mean, his decision-making skills were questionable. Yes, we can talk about the influence of Glaurung's curse, but we know specifically that when he was in certain locations, that was not effective, that he was free to make decisions differently. So it's a tough situation because, of course, once you're used to a certain pattern of thinking, even if that pattern of thinking was influenced by Glaurung, even though you may now be free of that particular power, Morgoth's curse at that point didn't have an effect on him when he was in Doriath, you're still in that pattern of thinking. So it is going to be difficult to break free of that. Yeah.
Well, and I think we've even been sort of a little dismissive, and maybe not dismissive, but we've sort of laughed a little bit at the idea that Elrond counts him among the great heroes of the First Age.
We've kind of snickered at it.
We have snickered at it, and explained it away as like, he was still a great hero. I mean,
he slew Glaurung.
Not somebody you want to be friends with, but he was a great
or
hero.
Related to
only because your life expectancy would be very short if you're one of his friends. And poor Beleg, I mean.
Oh man, yeah.
But
too soon.
But he killed Glaurung.
Yeah, exactly.
And if Glaurung were not killed there, Glaurung remains, one of Morgoth's weapons in the war. Who knows how that plays out.
So there was when I got to, because I did finally get to that scene at the end of the Council of Elrond and exploring the Lord of the Rings.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And when we got there, what I suddenly realized was that there's one thing that all three of those folks have in common: Hurin, Turin, and Beren. And that is the direct defiance of Morgoth himself.
Yes,
absolutely.
It's less about how friendly were they with the elves and how constructive was that friendship? Because again, Turin suffers on that analysis, right? But especially because don't forget, in addition to the curse of Morgoth that Turin was struggling against and attempting to defy ill-advisedly, and not successfully, but still working to defy for his whole life, there's floating in the background that Turin is going to be the one who's going to kill Morgoth in the end, right? And so, all three of them, Beren, Hurin, Turin, have done what Frodo is setting out to do. go into, like basically go to confront the Dark Lord to his face and defy him. That seems to be the category that he's sort of putting Frodo in that moment, because that's what Frodo is setting out to do. And it was sort of a realization we were coming to in that class. It is a big deal. His killing Glaurung is a big deal. Like, that's like the concrete accomplishment that Turin, it's what's on his tombstone, right? Literally his epitaph. And yet there's that bigger picture, I think, with the three of them when you put that together.
We haven't talked about Beren and Luthien yet. We've talked a lot about Turin. We've talked a lot about Hurin. We haven't talked about Beren and Luthien. Mm-hmm. How does this theme play out in the tale of Beren and Luthien? I mean, certainly, knocking on Morgoth's front door.
Knock, knock, knocking on Morgoth's door.
I was waiting for that.
Tricking the guard dog.
Yeah.
It's like in a cartoon, like throwing a raw steak to the guard dog so it gets distracted. I mean, same kind of thing. The theme plays out pretty similarly in Beren and Luthien's story, because that is not a story of fighting prowess. That is a story of two characters whose love for each other keeps them going through some horrifying things.
Right, and it isn't exactly, they're certainly facing impossible odds. The quest to get the Silmaril is literally given to him so that it would kill, because it was impossible, right? I'm setting you this thing that I genuinely believe to be impossible because I want you to try it and certainly die.
Right. Stingall's Rube Goldberg assassination attempt.
Exactly, right. But Beren's response to that is, well, I will go do that. And his response is not like, okay, I will devise a cunning plan that will enable me to succeed against all the odds. That's not his attitude, right? Nor is it Luthien's attitude when she joins with him to do that. And then, of course, there's that other time when they're facing impossible odds, namely death, right? Mortality itself, when Beren is dead. And Luthien's like, okay. Beren and Luthien's story doesn't feel to me the same, as the Hurin story. I'm not putting my finger exactly on how it differs, but I feel that it does differ. Luthien's confidence when she just tells Beren to tarry for her, right? There's the attitude of Luthien towards the mortality question, which would seem to be the most impossible odds of all, right there at the end, doesn't feel to me like Hurin defying Morgoth. There's a kind of confidence that she has, which doesn't seem to me the same as the kind of perseverance against impossible odds that we've talking about in other ways. But
she kind of just assumes that, we'll be able to take care of this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stroll right into Mandos. I'm going to persuade him to let you go. And
there
that's
does
exactly
feel
what
like
happens.
more of a we've got this kind of attitude than I'm used to seeing when impossible odds are on the table.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that just because Luthien is as amazing as she is? Or
well, yes.
I think of a lot of it is that she's less. There has to be less combativeness for it. I think Hurin's just as confident. He's basically telling Morgoth, "Oh, you can't touch me. I get to go beyond the circles of the world. You only have power here, and there's going to come a time where you've got no power over me." But he has to be, because of the nature of who he's going against. He's having to be very combative about it, very forceful and dramatic. And Luthien, on the other hand, is having a similar approach to this issue of mortality, but it's not a confrontational one. It's a very, like you said, confident, and we've got this. But I don't know that it differs quite as much as that. It's more of a matter of tone, it seems to me. I don't know. But you're right, they definitely differ, but I'm not sure if it's one that has a lot of substance to it.
that is the most extreme, to Corey's point, that's the most extreme triumph over impossible odds.
Mortality.
Nobody else does that. Nobody else
even tries.
Nobody else reaches into the underworld and brings somebody back.
That just doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here stewing, and I'm glad that most of the people in the future will be hearing this and not seeing this, because I'm just kind of staring off into space thinking. There seem to me two significant differences here with characters that might be playing a part. One is that often in our conversations we've been talking about humans, whereas we're dealing with an elf here.
Yeah.
And the other is the difference of gender. We're dealing with a woman instead of a man. And so I wonder if those two differences are playing a part here in the way that Tolkien chooses to depict these things. So if I reach back in my mind, I can remember there's a scholar, whose name is escaping me at the moment, who talks about womanism in Tolkien's work and how Tolkien seems to value certain qualities of feminism and certain qualities of masculinism. And this is an article from the 80s. And dancing and singing and the arts were seen as more feminine qualities in Tolkien's writing. And so perhaps what we're seeing play out in the Luthien story is power exerted through those means as opposed to war, weapon making, really confrontational courage. So that might be playing a role. I really wish Claire Moore were up here because she wrote like the most amazing paper on Luthien last year, and I'm sure she could give us a better answer.
All right, I think we can move on to another question. What do you think,
think
Alan?
so. Well, let's talk about adaptations for a little bit. What is an example of this theme being illustrated really well in one of the major adaptations of Tolkien's work? And we can go back as far as you want. You want to go to BBC, you want to go to Rankin and Bass, you want to go to Bakshi, or we can take Jackson or even the Amazon one if you want.
I mean, the first one that comes to mind for me is Helm's Deep in Jackson's movie. I mean, but he's kind of just doing what Tolkien's done, right? He hasn't really invented something of his own. So I don't know if that.
Nobody's turned the volume up to 11.
Yeah, that's fair.
Especially by bringing the elves in.
By bringing the elves in, and also by bringing all those women and children to that place.
Yes,
right?
raising the stakes,
Yeah.
raising the price of failure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he's made it basically in Jackson's version. The entire population of Rohan, we're meant to believe, is behind those walls, right? I mean, he doesn't say that, but he kind of implies it. And so if that stronghold fails, then that's it. They're wiped out. Whereas that's not really what's going on in the book.
No.
So he's definitely turning it up. Any other ideas?
In Return of the King, I'm reminded of a line that Theoden says, and I can't remember the line that immediately precedes it, but he says, "But we'll meet them in battle nonetheless."
Oh, yes.
Which is very much that, we're facing impossible, like we are likely going to our deaths, but we're going to go out the way we choose to.
The risk of choosing a controversial example. In episode 6 of The Rings of Power, they've given Bronwyn one of Sam's lines from Mordor. Battle's about to happen, and Theo asks Bronwyn to tell him the comforting thing she used to always tell him. And so she says verbatim Sam's line of, the shadow's coming, but there is light above forever beyond its reach. But then she goes on, she adds another line to it. And what she adds is, if you reach for the star or hold on to the light, the darkness will never reach you. Which, to me, the way that I interpreted that scene was an externalizing of something that we all kind of internalize when we read that scene from Sam. When we read Sam having this kind of courage, this kind of transcendent moment of the evil won't win, we kind of take it on a personal level sometimes of, when we're reading the book and we're having a hard time, we go, well, if Sam can face those odds, I can face my odds. And so to me, that felt like a really kind of true to the text kind of reinterpreting of that line, even though it did change it from kind of a transcendent comfort to more of a personal comfort.
I also loved how they have, right before that scene, you have Arondir talking to the villagers, trying to pump them up, right? Like he's giving like a, we can win, and they're like, maybe. And he's like, no, say it louder, and they're like, okay, we maybe think we can win. But so he's trying to encourage Umdir, right? Hope that it's going to turn out okay. And then immediately after that, we get Bronwyn talking Estelle to Theo, right? And that juxtaposition I thought was really powerful to emphasize that, like, that's, yeah. I mean, look, what Arondir was doing is a smart and sensible thing to do with a troop of people trying to defend their homes. Like, yes, by all means, let's try to instill some Umdir that will probably be practical, right?
Yeah. Right.
The immediate shift to the Estelle encouragement there, I thought was really made even the more effective by that contrast.
Well, and as you bring up that one, Corey, I'm reminded of Aragorn's speech in front of the Black Gates in Jackson's Return of the King, which I know everyone in this room can recite from memory.
Of course.
But that's another one that was Jackson's invention, and it is. I mean, that's a very obvious kind of on the nose example of the theme. Whereas I really like, especially the Bronwyn example, because it is subtle and it speaks to a different kind of hope and maybe determination. I don't think we've used this word yet, but in the face of certain defeat.
Yeah, and to use another Rings of Power example, one of my favorite moments from season 1 was the moment in episode 4, which was the second Numenor episode, the wave episode, when the petals start falling and Muriel turns. And oh man, like the exchanged glance between Muriel and Elendil in that moment is so powerful. I loved that scene. But her choice to, like the odds that we have seen her, and anyway, those of us who knew Tolkien were suspecting all along that she had faithful leanings, right? That she was like a closeted member of the faithful, right, from the beginning. But she was explicitly facing massive political opposition against that and is trying to navigate that in cautious political ways. And yet in that moment, she turns against the tide of her entire culture to say, no, we're doing this. We're going to go back and support the elves. And then, of course, Pharazôn goes along for other reasons. But anyway, that moment of turning by her, and that say, I'm going to set Numenor on this different course.
And we're going to be faithful and support the elves in installing Sauron as the king of the Southlands.
That was an accident.
I'm kidding.
Sometimes plans backfire, admittedly.
Well, yeah,
Every once in a while.
But you're absolutely right.
It didn't go perfectly.
Yeah,
of course.
But
she couldn't foresee everything.
And that was the same episode in which she had was it earlier in that episode that she'd had the conversation with Galadriel about, this is why we can't do this.
Yep.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a different kind of adverse odds, isn't it? It's just sort of the expectation of those around you who are ostensibly on your side.
Not only just her people who would rebel against that, perhaps, but the leader of the opposition, so to speak. I mean, she knows what she's going to face from Pharazôn, or at least she thinks she does. He has his own rationale for going along, like you said. But she has to know that he's going to oppose this, which, of course, he eventually does. But, yeah, that's a good observation.
Yeah, I really like that one.
So does this mean, this just dawned on me in the show, so does Sauron have a eucatastrophe in the form of Galadriel coming to instill him as...
he has several, right?
He's pretty down on his luck. He's been,
he's out there on a raft getting chased by a sea monster. And
it was not to be counted on.
Yeah.
So... even Sauron can have eucatastrophes.
I guess so.
Don't get me started, man. Don't get me started.
This is an interesting discussion point.
Since we know the source of eucatastrophes.
Does Spabimi, does the M become Melkor then? If it's for Sauron?
Shall prove but Melkor's instrument. Wow.
I would to go back to the Jackson films, and this is not something that they invented, but one of the things, this was always high on my list of things I couldn't believe they did. Like that they kept from the book that I did not expect them to keep from the book. And that was the Rohirrim riding into battle shouting death.
Yes.
Death. Yeah. I couldn't believe they did that. And it was awesome. I mean, and that was a real, in some ways, even more than Aragorn's speech in front of the Black Gate still is like, we're underdogs, but we can win speech, right? It is not this day. Like, we are not going to lose. Like, it looks like this looks really bad, but don't worry, have Amdir, it's going to pan out. Like, I don't have any solid evidence for this, just trust me.
What are you basing that on, Aaron?
Right.
Yeah.
It's 100-1, and we're facing a full encirclement.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great speech, but it's not that, like, that, but, Theoden's, like, his death speech, like we are, and the whole way that pans out, like, and even the genuine uncertainty, like, are they talking about whose death are we discussing here exactly? Are we talking about the death of the enemies?
Excuse me, Theoden King. I have a question, sir.
Right, exactly.
Whose death exactly?
Yeah. Is there an alternative package that I could sign up for?
You mean their death, right?
Right,
that's what we're writing.
Yeah. The sort of embracing of both, right? Anyway, I thought that was really, really. It's always, I think, it's one of my top. I think possibly my very favorite moment of the Peter Jackson films entirely is that charge.
I cannot disagree with that. And it's from my favorite couple of chapters of the book, so it's very satisfying for me to see it done so well cinematically.
Well, and I think another thing that we have to appreciate in terms of, looking at these adaptations is the way that they take this theme that we've identified as being so important, and through their influence have made it, kind of precipitate down into larger cultures in things like memes. Memes took off at the same time as Lord of the Rings, and so Lord of the Rings memes became so pervasive. So like we have, how many of you have seen memes of Aragorn making that speech? But it's like, there may be a day when I have to take more than one trip to bring in the groceries, but it's not this day. It's taken that same perspective, that same like domineering,
heroic
call,
perspective,
exactly, and made it that kind of everyday
Very
thing.
mundane. Yeah, exactly.
And so suddenly we have this like ethos being, seeped into our daily lives.
Yeah.
That's true. And there may come a day that I don't see a there may come a day meme, but it is also not this day. I mean, it's every day we see one. That's true.
Well, and that reminds me of something Corey was talking about earlier, which we kind of got onto another topic, but this idea of sort of applying these heroic ethos examples, this heroic literature, and taking these lessons from it and applying it to our very mundane, non-heroic lives. I mean, surely not every Anglo-Saxon who heard the Battle of Malden poem was actually a warrior, right? I mean, surely there were like just farmers there who were still taking lessons from this story, that even though it was not necessarily on the surface seemingly applicable to their lives. And that just reminds me of something you said earlier, Corey, about sort of taking these lessons from Tolkien's work, even though our lives do not have that level of adversity, hopefully.
Yeah.
Shawn, I love that, hopefully, right? Like, I want to leave the qualification out there because I can't rule out that one of you will actually have to go to, like, Mordor and throw the ring in the cracks of doom.
You never know. Anything can happen.
Exactly, yeah.
Anything can happen.
Yeah. But we hope that doesn't literally happen to you, yeah.
And we hope that, we'll never have to face an army of Vikings marching across a bridge that we let them march across, But it doesn't.
But if you do, we're pulling for you. So.
All right. Any other kinds of perseverance, boldness, courage, stubbornness, any other examples that anyone is thinking about that they'd like to talk about that we haven't hit on yet?
Maybe ones that aren't quite as obvious, right?
Yeah, I feel like we've hit on like the big heroic figures, right? We've hit on Frodo and Sam. We've hit on Turin, Hurin, Beren, and Luthien.
Well, like the one you led with, Luke. The idea of Arwen
yeah.
at Aragorn's tomb. I mean, that or whatever you would call it when his body was just laid out on a stone. I don't know. That's not really a tomb, is it?
Right.
But
was he lying in state? Was that what he was doing?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. But that moment was certainly a not obvious choice, and I really like that. I was wondering if maybe Matt, Corey, if you guys had a maybe less obvious choice to talk about there in terms of the theme.
No pressure.
I have one. Niggle.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I mean, the question technically was legendarium, but I will accept that.
No, that's fine. Let's talk about this.
I will definitely accept Niggle.
Absolutely. We've already seen a presentation of Niggle as a hero. Yeah. So
yeah. I was just thinking about the kind of, and again, it connects back with, if I'd had like another hour to go over for my talk, I would have then followed up with a discussion of Bleep by Niggle. But anyway, it's Niggle's stubborn pursuit, right? There is no question. Niggle's never going to finish that painting. He knows he's never going to finish that painting. And so his whole attitude towards his painting, which of course changes over the course of the poem, but his both as an artist initially, in his pre-journey state, and then the revelations that happen and the enrichment of his perspective afterwards. I think we see both. Here Tolkien gives us a glimpse of, Luke, kind of what you were talking about that, sort of the hope beyond. It's not about like how whether your story, as Sam would say, has a sad ending or a happy ending, as the readers of the story would see, but that's not the whole story, right? And in Niggle we see some of the ending of it, the larger, usually invisible ending of it, but certainly his attitude towards just continuing on, even just taking care for leaves, right? I mean, it's foolish to do that. If his goal is to finish the painting, then obviously the thing to do is to spend less time on each leaf, right? If you don't do that, you're never going to finish the painting. So if the goal is to finish the painting, spend less time on each leaf. And why do I feel like I'm talking about exploring the Lord of the Rings again? But yeah, I mean, like his refusal to do that, right? And that's what ends up mattering, right? It's the fragment of the leaf that ends up impacting people within the world years later, right? The discovery of that leaf. Had he not taken the kind of care that he did for individual leaves, nobody would ever have known about his painting, right? So anyway, I think that's perhaps a more unconventional one, but certainly another applicability of the theme.
That's a wonderful example that's got me thinking beyond the legendarium for more examples. Mm-hmm. North Polar Bear comes to mind. Not the battle against the goblins, because those were not insurmountable odds. I mean, when he's like this
especially
big
for
and the
North
goblins,
Polar Bear.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for polar bears, like 15 times the size of the nearest goblin.
Yeah.
But his perseverance in writing letters to the Tolkien children, even though he knew that Santa Claus's personal secretary was going to make fun of him throughout.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say his insurmountable odds was Arctic. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Any other examples?
As I've gone on this journey of Tolkien fandom and through the process of diving deeper into the legendarium, Elrond has become one of my favorite characters. And maybe this isn't an exact fit in the way we've talked about a lot of the stories here, but his life is just filled with so much loss. And I've always thought it was amazing how the quest to destroy the ring, he knows it's going to result in him losing his daughter. They will not see each other again. And yet he does everything in his power to set Aragorn up to succeed and achieve that. And I just think that's such a powerful example of a different kind of heroism.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Because we were just talking about adaptations a moment ago, and this is not an opportunity to bash the Peter Jackson films, but the change in Elrond's character, where he spends the entire first two movies just trying to convince her not to marry Aragorn. He fights against this, whereas in the books he's accepted it. He has heroically accepted it, whereas he's still selfishly clinging to it, clinging to a different future in the movies. That's a good one. I like that.
It reminds me of Christine Larson has made the claim that even though Tolkien claims that Faramir is his write-in character, Elrond might actually match his biography a bit more closely in terms of the number of people that Elrond has lost, and his perspective of not changing who he is because of those losses. So I 100% agree that that's a great perspective from which to view this.
Yeah.
I was also wondering if we needed to mention the most determined character in the entire legendarium. I mean, Smeagol crossed all of Middle Earth 4 or 5 times.
That was determination. That was perseverance.
What would Smeagol say right now about the theme?
I was just being me. Just doing my thing,
That is.
You do you, Smeagol. You do you.
That is a good one.
It is.
I mean, he knows what he wants, and man, does he keep going after it.
I love Gandalf's line. He was not daunted by the distance, I'm sure. Yeah. No.
And what does he mean he put the fear of fire into him? That's...
Yeah.
Well, folks, I think we have time for one last short-ish question. What's been your favorite presentation at the Moot so far? Any new insights that you picked up, maybe a moment that you hadn't thought of before as one of those Our Strength Lessons moments?
I was just enthralled with Corey's talk yesterday, and that's not me just puffing up Corey, but just because I tend to gravitate toward the in-world mythology, and so here in recent months or so, looking more into Tolkien's life and just seeing the perseverance he had in trying to make the Silmarillion happen. That was really educational and inspiring during that talk yesterday.
I would just submit Joe's talk yesterday about Nigel as a Christian heroic hero. That was a fascinating talk to me. I've never thought of that. It blew my mind, absolutely. And the whole idea of him starting as a a flawed character. I don't even think I realized just how flawed he was when I read it before. I mean, I knew that he was, but it didn't really leap off the page quite the way it did when Joe talked through it. I thought
Right,
that was
you're comparing him to Parrish, and it's much easier to see Niggle as less as less flawed than Parrish.
because it's from Niggle's point of view.
Right,
but as Joe
exactly.
kind of
That's
suggested
the point.
yesterday, like Parrish really isn't that bad of
No.
a guy. Niggle's he's just obsessed with his own thing. He's like
He's very inwardly focused.
he can't pick his head up from this thing that is so important to him to see the people around him.
Yeah, that was a fantastic talk.
So yeah, that was a wonderful one.
I'm gonna say Professor Drout's talk just a few moments ago is the one for me in terms of picking up some more of our strength lessons and learning more about the Battle of Malden and just how Tolkien viewed that and sort of maybe how he was wrong. I thought that was fantastic.
For me, I've really enjoyed Claire Moore's paper about Nienor and Brethil, looking at it through both a feminist and disabilities lens. I thought it was really, really informative.
That was really wonderful. Yeah.
Man, so many good talks.
I was going to say Mike's talk too. I was really enjoying the opportunity to like go back to the source, as we're thinking about, and it really kind of helps contextualize so many of the the other things that we're thinking about, to really kind of dig back into the not only the roots of that, like where that quote comes from and what it means in its context, but also thinking through more what it meant to Tolkien and how then that kind of comes back and helps to recontextualize a bunch of the other things that we've been hearing about and talking about over the course of the Moot. So I really appreciated that.
Great.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But please be sure to join us again next week when James Tauber joins me as we begin the Muster of Rohan.
And Alan and I want to thank the members of Team PPP. That's our editor, Jordan Rennells, our barlaman, Becca Davis, along with our team of research assistants, our social media manager, Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator, Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
And speaking of the website, be sure to give us a visit there at theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got show notes, hilarious outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get all sorts of PPP merch.
And you'll also want to visit our completely refurbished library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is, first and foremost, a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, you'll find a link to it in our library. And we do get a small amount of compensation when you make your purchase, so we thank you for that.
Indeed. And we also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. I'm going to start with DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Mario in Utah, B in California, Joseph in Texas, Kathy from North Carolina, Lori from Washington, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, and Ned from Connecticut.
And there's also Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Dylan in Australia, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Karen in the UK, Zaksu in Illinois, Jim in Maryland, Brian in Texas, Sarah in New Jersey, June in Ireland, Joshua in Massachusetts, James in Florida, Lucy in Texas, and Connor in North Carolina. Thank you all so very much for your support.
Indeed, thank you. And I should say that so many of those names are actually in Milwaukee.
Yes. Yep.
So it's been great to see you all.
And folks, make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe now through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app, whatever it is.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your favorite moments of determination in the face of impossible odds to barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com. And if you want your voice literally heard, well, just send us audio of your question. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us.
Just please do us a favor. Please still email the question to Barlaman. Thankfully, Barlaman's become a bit more reliable in recent years, but there's still a lot of mail to sort through, so we'll try to get to you as soon as we can.
As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.